So I've had quite a few requests through from people asking me to do a movie review video for the film Fury from last year, and people just generally want to know what I think of this movie, and I haven't been able to respond because I just hadn't seen it. But I finally got around to seeing it last night. It's been a while, I know it's been out for quite a long time now, but just one of those films I just hadn't got around to catching up with. But yep, finally saw it. So I've had a day to kind of digest the movie and get a feel for it. And I never think it's a good idea with films to give you a verdict straight away. If I've seen a film and I'm asked what I make of it as soon as it's over, like if when you're in the cinema, I will never give a response. I'll just say, well, that was, yeah, I'm gonna have to digest that one. I just don't like to give snap judgments to films, because some of the best films I've ever seen have been films that I haven't necessarily liked upon first viewing. In fact, I've really not liked, such as Terrence Malick's The Thin Red Line from 1998. When I first saw that, I kind of felt like I'd seen something truly sensational and epic and a real masterpiece, but I just felt like it wasn't quite for me. But it lingered in the mind, and I've seen that film probably about 20 times now over the years, and I've done a review about that film from, I don't know, a year or two back, I can't remember, but it's somewhere on my upload stream. So anyway, Fury. So this is a 2014 World War II film starring Brad Pitt, and unlike other World War II films, the whole premise of this film, the way it was marketed, was that it was all about the tank combat. It was about the life of a tank crew, an Allied American tank crew, set during the last few months of World War II, April 1945 in Germany. So by this point, the Germans had really kind of, their forces were starting to deplete, so they were kind of throwing women and children and old men into the front line, basically getting everybody to try and fight. So the film kind of covers that to a certain extent. So the film's directed by David Ayer, who hasn't really, as far as I'm concerned, hasn't really done anything particularly memorable. I don't think there's any films he's previously directed that I've been particularly blown away by, to be honest. He's got a bit of a back catalogue, but it's nothing great really. One of the things that he has done is he was the writer for Training Day, and that's a great film. So he's done certain things that are pretty cool, but he's also done things that aren't so cool, such as U571. He didn't direct that, but he wrote the screenplay in 2000 for that film, and that's a very controversial film because of the fact that it basically stole a piece of British military history and Americanized it and put a spin on it, and basically made out that it was the US Navy who captured the Enigma code machine and cipher, when in fact it was the Royal Navy. And it was quite a despicable move, and David Ayer has since apologised, so I do have a little bit of respect for him. In 2006 he did actually say on Radio 4 in the UK that he regretted that period in his life, and he regretted writing that screenplay. He was quite honest about that, and he apologised. So that was big of him to do that, and I don't think he really could have done it at the time, because the film really was there to make money at the end of the day. Like all these things, it's not meant to be historically accurate, it's just there to make money. So anyway, because of that, I didn't go into this film thinking it was going to be something that was going to blow me away. I was kind of slightly apprehensive, frankly, because I didn't, basically this guy hasn't really got a particularly good history when it comes to directing. He hasn't really done much, frankly. But anyway, I gave the film a go. So my verdict is that I wanted this film to have lots of tank combat, and I'd heard that it was all about epic tank fights and Shermans versus Tigers, etc. And by the way, I'm going to start revealing the plot now. it's going to be spoiler central from this point on in the vid. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, stop watching it now, because I'm going to start talking about plot very openly. So you've been warned. So that's what I was expecting from this film. I didn't really want an anti-war film. I just wanted good tank combat. The more realistic, the better. Didn't really care about the anti-war sentiments. I just wanted it to be a good old war film, basically, because we don't really get those nowadays. So it was quite an interesting idea to get that. But anyway, we didn't really get that. We got a war film that attempted to be anti-war at times, and by that I mean there were certain scenes where characters would talk about the kind of war is hell elements and things, but it wasn't really overly done. So you always need a little bit of that in war films. There were certain scenes that were quite graphic and quite nasty, and they kind of definitely did capture that kind of Saving Private Ryan sense of realism, and it was the kind of thing that you kind of see in it's grim. And I'm thinking really about the scene where one of the Shermans gets ambushed by a child with a Panzerfaust, and a crewman comes out on fire, and he's so badly burnt that he just shoots himself in the head. And yeah, that was quite a horrific scene to watch. And there are other scenes where you see bodies getting run over by tank tracks in the muds and just small things like that. And yeah, it's quite poignant stuff, but it wasn't overly done. And the film was really all about just getting in the shit with the grunts, and there was lots of combat, but it wasn't. I was expecting a kind of Battle of the Bulge style epic tank combat type movie, but it was nothing like that. I think it's quite difficult to make films like that nowadays, because there aren't really many authentic World War II vehicles left that are running. But if the budget would allow for it, they could obviously manufacture lots of fake tank chassis and kind of have these crazy epic tank battles, but they weren't really going for that in this film. There are only about 5 or 6 Shermans on screen at once at any one time, and I think you only see one German tank in the whole film, which is actually an authentic Tiger tank, the only working Tiger tank left in the world, I think, Tiger 131, and it's actually from the Tank Museum in England, Bovington Tank Museum, which I've still not been to, and it's a travesty because I live quite near there actually, and I really want to go, but I've still not been, which is kind of crazy. I will go there soon though. But it was actually captured by the British 48th Royal Tank Regiment in Tunisia, and it's quite cool that it was actually used in the film. Apparently it's the first time an actual authentic Tiger has been used in a movie since the 1940s. So that was good, and fair play to the director for insisting on that and getting that done, because they could have quite easily just used a mock-up, which I think they did in Saving Private Ryan during the end battle scene. And yeah, that was a very good scene with the Tiger, and I'll talk about that a little later. But anyway, regardless of all that, the actual film itself, it didn't really work for me for the most part, to be honest. Largely because I felt that it was trying to make out it was a realistic war film, when really it was pure Hollywood most of the time. There were scenes that were laughably poor, and the way the battle scenes were shot was just messy and just not really good enough, to be honest. I think it wasn't really well directed, and the cinematography really wasn't up to snuff, really, up to a standard that I'd want in a film like this. It suffers from the old problem that a lot of these war films do, where they insist on, and I don't know who makes this decision, I don't know if it would be the director or the editor or perhaps even the film company itself, but they insist on playing music during combat scenes. I think it's known in the industry as diegetic music, or perhaps non-diegetic, I can't remember the difference now. But it's just a poor decision to make. And if you've got these battle scenes, having music in the background, it takes a lot away from the action, and it really, in fact, it kind of makes the whole thing seem a bit kind of cheesy, and you lose the sense of authenticity, and you lose the sense of immersion, and it's not really acceptable. And I mean, we live in a post Saving Private Ryan world now, and I think that film definitely changed the way people expect war films to be, and this film was kind of like a throwback of the kind of mid-90s war films you got, where it kind of, I don't know really, it almost had elements of Pearl Harbor in it, which I know was actually a post Private Ryan film from 2001, but it was a Michael Bay film, so it's kind of not saying a lot really. But the point I'm making is that it kind of was a bit cheesy, and it didn't really have enough artistic direction, and it didn't. The director wasn't bold enough really with this film. It was very run of the mill. It was very by the numbers, and it was very cliched. It was just a cliched war film where the Allies had kind of made out to be these great guys, these kind of farm boys, you know, who kind of have great ethics and morality, and the Germans are kind of there to be rescued and saved from the evil of Hitler, and all the SS troops are just a bunch of dumbasses who run around out of cover and can't seem to aim, and have these perfect lined up shots of 88 Flak 88s and Panzerfasts and somehow miss. And there was one scene where a guy had a Panzerfaust and he fired it pretty much point blank range at the Sherman, and he missed. It went up in the air. Just stupid scenes like that. And there were just other scenes where it was the limits of believability were being pushed to the point where I couldn't really accept it. But saying all of that, there were some good battle scenes in this film, and there were moments I was expecting it to go one way and really just gearing up for disappointment, but then in fact it didn't go that way at all, and actually it got a bit darker, and I was like, oh, okay, that's not bad. That's not quite what I was expecting. And I'm talking here about things like the end's battle. I was expecting him to pull through, and I was expecting Brad Pitt's character to somehow survive getting shot 3 times in the chest by a sniper, but no, there was none of that. And I was definitely expecting the sniper who killed Brad Pitt's character to get killed by the guy, Norman, I think his name was, with the grease gun. I was expecting him to get killed, because I just thought there's no way a film like this is going to let that sniper survive. He's going to get killed as a sort of recompense for killing Brad Pitt. But no, there wasn't any of that. I think in a way the film started to find its feet near the end, which is strange, because usually with films like this, they start off quite good, and then the end is what lets them down. But in fact, with this film, the end was actually the really good bit, in my opinion. The battle was a bit over the top, but it was good. It was quite intense at times, apart from the fact that they seem to have almost unlimited ammo. But then I was saying that they did run out a few times, and they had to run to get ammo boxes and things. So no, I can accept all that. The scene in the town was pretty cool when they got ambushed by a couple of MG42 positions, one in a cellar, and the MG42 ripped through a few troops kind of riding by the tanks. And yeah, there were some pretty good scenes in this film. I'm not going to kind of deny that. But for the most part, it was just a very run-of-the-mill war film. And it really doesn't hold a candle to something like Saving Private Ryan or Band of Brothers. And really every scene in this film was an attempt, really, in my opinion, to capture some of that, and it never really did. But it was probably a bit darker at times, though. I mean, they weren't really particularly likeable people in the tank. Even Brad Pitt's character was a bit of an arsehole, frankly, and you never really got the sense that they were done out to be sort of great people. I mean, I know I said earlier they were, you know, the moral Allied troops. There was a bit of that, but they're also kind of messed up in their heads and a bit shell shocked and a bit bit fucked up, frankly, from months of combat. So I'd say in terms of a score out of 10, I'd give this probably a 6. So it's not, I would say it's not a bad film, and I'd say it's a pretty decent, solid war film actually. But it's not as good as it could have been, and I just think it needed to be a little bit more realistic. And the best scene really for me was it was the end, but it's difficult. The whole, I mean, the big scene in this really was probably the scene with the tiger taking on the 4 Shermans, and it was quite cool. Like, they fired a few smoke grenades at the tank to block their visibility, and the tiger was obviously done out to be a superior vehicle, and it kind of ripped through these Shermans quite easily, and then the lead Sherman, the Fury, managed to flank the tiger and get a rear shot in. That was all quite well done, and it kind of played out exactly how I'd expect it to play out, because they wanted it to kind of, I think they were trying to capture the sense of menace that Sherman crews must have felt when confronted by a Tiger tank. But the problem is that it for people who know about World War II and know about tank combat, it was all a bit just meh, really. It was quite cool to see it on screen. It's not often you see tank combat on screen, particularly World War II tank combat, so it's really great to see it. But I just would like to have seen more of that, and more sort of nasty injuries sustained from tank combat, more sense of what it's like to be a Sherman crew right in the thick of a big battle with German armour, not just Tigers but maybe Panthers and all sorts of vehicles. But you didn't really get that in this. I mean, really, this film was all about a Sherman crew kind of like moving around and using a 30 caliber machine gun to clear out positions and that kind of thing. But anyway, I'd say this is a pretty solid film, and it's nothing more than that. It's certainly not a great film, and it's not going to be a classic by any stretch of the imagination, but it's okay, and I possibly might even watch it again one day. So if you haven't seen it, I'd say you probably should check it out, but just don't expect anything particularly amazing. I think giving it 6 out of 10 is probably actually in sync with the general consensus, judging by Metacritic anyway. It's currently rocking an average aggregate of 64 out of 100. So it's generally favourable reviews, basically, and I think that's fair. I think that's a fair assessment of the film. It's generally okay. It's not a classic, and it could have been more had it been in the hands of a director who was perhaps willing to push the envelope slightly. And in my opinion, the main flaws of this movie and the main elements that prevent it from heading towards the scale of like maybe 8 out of 10 or even higher is the fact that it's one of those World War II films that they still fall for the old trap of basically portraying the enemy as a bunch of dumbasses who don't seem to be able to get their acts in gear during combat. And really, directors need to be a lot more sensible about the way they portray enemy troops in these films. They need to be as trained and as intelligent as the Allies, because of course they were. The average German soldier on the grounds wasn't running rounds out of cover allowing himself to get sprayed down by a 30 caliber machine gun. They were being sensible. They were hiding in bushes. They were attempting to flank the tank. They were getting up close and throwing grenades in, not just running at the machine gun and standing around generally not really knowing what to do. So there was a little bit of that, but I have seen other war films over the years that are far worse than this when it comes to doing that kind of thing, so it's not really a big deal. But if the film had maybe given the Germans given a German perspective on things, perhaps, I think is perhaps what I'm trying to say, then it may have been a bit better. I did quite like the scene with the German women who were kind of held up in their apartment. That was quite good, and it kind of broke away from all the battle stuff, and that was quite a well done scene. I thought good bit of acting in that scene. Shia LaBeouf was quite good, and all that was pretty well done. Like I say, the biggest problem was just the way they portrayed the Germans, the actual troops. That is, just made them out to be pretty stupid at times. And the other thing I think maybe that I would say about this movie is it would have been nice if they'd have perhaps just made a bit more effort to acknowledge that there were other Allied forces on the field, like the British and the Canadians. I know it's an American movie at the end of the day, but it would just be nice if it was acknowledged that the British were fighting in Shermans as well, Tommy roasters as they were known by the Germans. So it just is a little caveat I'd add to the review, really, but it's no big deal, So there you go. I'd say 6 out of 10, solid war film, but no more than just a solid war film. Nothing particularly memorable, or certainly not a classic.